Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I will take the opportunity for the lull in conversation. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all this evening, and thank you for coming on a rather bleak November evening. My name is Carol Mundell. I'm Professor of Extragalactic Astronomy and Head of Astrophysics at the University of Bath, and it's also my great honour to be the current President of the Science Council. The Science Council is a membership organisation made up of over 36 professional bodies across a diverse range of science areas in the academic, public and private sectors. We are an umbrella organisation, and we provide member bodies with a forum for collaboration and to amplify collective voices of the science community and to act as a convening role for our wider community across our UK and international members. And tonight is the first time in a few years that we have been able to host the Sir Gareth Roberts Lecture. And so it's a particular pleasure to have you all here in person. I'll also say, hello to those of you who may be watching this afterwards, the recording that we will make available. And tonight in particular, it's a real pleasure to have Professor Dame Ottoline Leyser to help us to celebrate science. And I think this is a really positive evening. But before I introduce Ottoline, what I'd like to do is just do some housekeeping and give you a little bit of Ottoline's background, because it's particularly exciting for me to have her here today. I previously was the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and latterly the Chief International Science Envoy for UK Government, and it was a particular pleasure to work with Ottoline in her role as Chief Executive of UKRI, and particularly her outstanding teams in the international network in countries like India, China and the USA. So I'm very much looking forward to Ottoline's lecture tonight. Housekeeping, we're not expecting any fire drill this evening, so if you hear a fire alarm, please do evacuate. That will be a real alarm. The exit is here, and you just go straight out the door that you came in, and colleagues from the Science Council will be here to guide you. You may already have found the cloakrooms, which are downstairs, along with the restrooms as well, so please feel free to use those as you need. And we will also have a reception after the lecture for those of you who'd like to stay, take some refreshments, and additionally help you to network with one another and make new connections. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce Ottoline. So, Professor Dame Ottoline Leyser is the Chief Executive of UK Research and Innovation, and she's also Research Professor of Botany at the University of Cambridge. UKRI, I think I'm right in saying, was formed in 2016, and it brings together the UK's research councils, Innovate UK and Research England, and they operate with a combined budget of more than £8 billion per year across all of the research and innovation landscape, from arts and humanities through social sciences, through to physical, biological, medical sciences and engineering. Prior to this, Ottoline was director of the Sainsbury Laboratory at the University of Cambridge, an interdisciplinary research institute combining computational modelling with molecular genetics and cell biology to elucidate the dynamical systems underpinning the control of plant growth and development. Ottoline is a preeminent plant scientist, and she has a long list of accolades, honours and awards to her name, and I know I'll not be able to do them justice in my speech tonight. And I'm going to try a little bit. I'm going to name check a few of them, but I would certainly encourage you to look up her biography, and she may be able to tell us in her lecture how accurate Wikipedia is, but it's a good page. Ottoline has a long-term interest in research culture and its effect on the quality and effectiveness of the research system. She chaired the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, examining these issues, and has been actively engaged in work aimed at generating a more inclusive, creative and connected culture. And she has worked extensively in science policy. And bringing together these very often disparate talents in one portfolio, I think, is really rather unique. In recognition of her eminent research, she's a Fellow of the Royal Society. She's a member of the Leopoldina and the EMBO, and an international member of the US National Academy of Sciences. In 2017, she was appointed DBE for services to plant science, science and society, and equality and diversity in science. And if that's not enough, I do have to name check the particular plant, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but the work that she's done particularly works on a plant called, or a family of plants called Arabidopsis, as a model system. And I looked up this system, and as a space scientist, this actually really it thrilled me, actually. In 1982, the crew of the Soviet Salyut 7 space station grew some Arabidopsis, thus becoming the first plants to flower and produce seeds in space, which I thought was fantastic. They had a lifespan of 40 days. Seeds were also taken to the moon on the Chang'e 4 lander in 2019 as part of a student experiment. And as of May 2022, I believe they have also been successfully grown in samples of lunar soil. So moon salad, I think, may not be on the menu tonight, but it's my immense and great pleasure to invite Ottoline to the stage to tell us about powering the future, a research and innovation system for the 21st century. Ottoline.
So thank you very much indeed for that very kind introduction. And it's great also to see how one can build connections between disciplines in all kinds of unusual and different ways. So thank you. It's great to be here, to be able to speak to this very wonderful audience. Science Council is a wonderful organisation doing a fantastic job at promoting the full range of skills and talents that you need for a thriving research and innovation system. And that's essentially the core of what I want to talk about this evening. I have some slides. Am I in charge of them? That's good. I am. And I want to start with Sir Gareth Roberts, who is, in whose honour this lecture is named. And I feel very honoured to be giving a lecture to the Science Council in his name. And I am plenty old enough to remember the report that he wrote 20 years ago, this year, called Set for Success. Set was the sort of 20 years old word for what's now called STEM, I suppose. Those acronyms move around a lot. And the report focused very heavily on skills, on the fact that the economy needed continuous innovation and those high-quality, innovative businesses to thrive, and that was critically dependent on a supply of science and engineering skills in the UK, and how important it was to attract talented people into these domains. And he set out a whole series of recommendations, of actions that businesses, universities, and others needed to take in order to support the skills agenda that he saw as so crucial for the future of an innovation-led economy. There were challenges that he identified. There was a disconnect between the demand for STEM graduates and the number of people graduating in STEM disciplines. There was a shortage of women choosing STEM subjects at A-level and in higher education. There were poor student experiences and very constrained and unhelpful perceptions of STEM careers. And the career path for people working in STEM was insufficiently attractive and clear. And the graduate and postgraduate education was not broad enough to embed an understanding of the transferability of the skills in the research training environment. All of these things are highlighted in the report, and as I say, I practically grew up with this report. As a lecturer at the University of York, there was, as a result of the report, money that came into universities that was called Roberts money, that was to support initiatives to address these kinds of challenges in the university context in particular. And as Carol pointed out, I've had a very long-term interest in how to build a really thriving research and innovation culture. And this kind of consideration of the skills and the communities that you need to build to do high-quality science was very much at the heart of the Roberts report. And the funding that came with it was, I think, really influential in how universities thought about research training and how research councils thought about research training, and I also was at that point involved with the BBSRC, thinking about their graduate training and how one could think more broadly about the kinds of skills that a graduate student could build as they developed their training. We introduced, for example, a 3-month internship in an environment outside academia to try to bridge some of the gaps that the Roberts Review identified. And so it was all very wonderful and very helpful, but I've got to say, here we are 20 years later, and the R&D People and Culture Strategy from last year, frankly, identifies a virtually identical list of challenges that we face. So although I think we made progress, I don't think it was sufficiently sustained, and I think somewhere I wouldn't say lost our way, but lost the momentum that was gathering really to drive this agenda to the point where we need to take it. And so it was wonderful to come into UKRI and be able to work and contribute with colleagues in BAYS to the development of the People and Culture Strategy, which identifies these issues and represents a call to arms to think more deeply and systemically about how to address them. So they're the same kinds of things. The very narrow and unattractive career paths we see in R&D, shortages of skills right across the system, a perception that research is for very clever people over there and is separate from the rest of our society, a research culture in the separate place over there that is not very inclusive, and then a failure to develop and support those wider skills that researchers need. And all of this in the context of increased competition for global talent. So the culture of research and the way that we support people in the research system is critical for our economic success, not only in the context of building those high-quality companies, but being able to build them here in the UK in an environment that supports our talent. So for me, most of the issues that were identified both in the Roberts Review and in the People and Culture Strategy are about barriers. They're about a whole range of barriers that we have erected within the research and innovation system and between the research and innovation system and wider society. So there are barriers between disciplines, there are barriers between research and innovation, and I think most fundamentally, there are quite deep barriers between research and innovation as an activity, as a creative nexus in our society and wider society. It's very much perceived, as I said, as other. And I think that's one of the fundamental problems that we as a research and innovation community need to address. How do we break down this barrier between the researchers and the innovators and everybody else? And I think it's as much an issue for us inside the research and innovation community and how we conceptualize science, research, innovation as it is for people who do not currently consider themselves to be part of that research and innovation system. Because I think this barrier is profoundly unhelpful both for the researchers and innovators and for wider society, and extraordinarily unhelpful for the relationship between the two. And I would argue that it is rooted in a concept for research and innovation that we have built over many years, that it's done by these lone geniuses. It's done by people beavering away on their little projects all by themselves in a lab, and they manage to do this work because they are special Einstein-like figures who have some magical genius property that allows them to make progress. We all know that this is not true, but it's quite deep in how we think about this. It's deep in kind of popular culture about science and scientists, and it has accidentally become embedded in the way we think about assessment for research and innovation. We're very rooted in individual people who are leading projects. What have they done? What's their personal contribution? We're not good at assessing research and innovation teams. We're not good at assessing outcomes of teams. We want to know who did that thing, who's responsible for that outcome, and how can we attribute that to one person. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and as I say, it's really bad for researchers and innovators. It creates these very unrealistic expectations about what they're supposed to achieve. They're supposed to be these amazing geniuses, and it biases the way our assessment systems work towards asking those questions about individual criteria. Are you the lead applicant on this grant? Are you the first or the senior author on this paper? Was it you that won the fantastic prize? What was your personal contribution to this outcome? Not what was your contribution in a team that delivered the outcome. We're very keen on Nobel Prize winners. We know that the Nobel Prize is really struggling these days because they're only allowed to give their prize to a maximum of 3 people. It's very difficult to identify the kind of breakthrough discoveries that the Nobel Prize likes to reward these days that were done by 3 people. Now, I don't want to in any way denigrate the lone geniuses of this world. There are some. We need some lone geniuses in the system. But for the most part, most of us working in research and innovation are not that. We shouldn't be expected to be that. We shouldn't be assessed as though we were, because we need to build strong, diverse, connected communities in research and innovation to do the really tricky work that needs to be done, and to support each other in the context of an activity that is fundamentally really very challenging and insecure. If you're walking into the unknown, which you are by definition, if you're a researcher or an innovator, that's a scary thing to do. It's actually much better to go there with someone else. And if you can build that kind of environment where people feel more secure about what they're doing, they're willing to take bigger intellectual risks, and that's when you really start to make those transformative discoveries, especially if you're taking those risks with a group of people who are different from you and therefore able to contribute different ideas. And that collective activity is demonstrably more creative and more successful. So this whole lone genius model is very bad for researchers and innovators and very bad for the quality of our research and innovation system. And beyond that, and critically very much in the Science Council's agenda, results in massive undervaluing of the very much wider range of people than the people who would label themselves as researchers and innovators, who are absolutely essential for the success of the research and innovation endeavour. All of the people who work around people who are holding the test tubes, those people are critical. They are a critical part of the team, and they provide a whole range of inputs without which the system simply wouldn't work. So this lone genius is very bad for researchers and innovators, and also I think I've emphasised it's bad for research and innovation, and it's particularly bad for the relationship between research and innovation and society. If you think research and innovation is about some kind of geeky Einstein person who spends their life locked in a library, it's not very attractive from the outside. So that recognition of what a career in research and innovation is like is completely missing if you think it's done by that kind of person. Most people don't see themselves in that way. Most people are therefore not thinking, that's what I want to do, because they can't see the excitement and the fulfillment that you get from working in that creative kind of dynamic team with that enormous range of roles that are essential to drive it forward. So it massively narrows the range of people who are motivated to work in research and innovation, whether as researchers and innovators or one of that much wider team. And it makes it much harder to connect the activities that we do in research and innovation with wider society. So when you discover something wonderful, the adoption and diffusion of that is more difficult when you've got that barrier, and research and innovation is done by other people we don't really understand over there. So creating that high trust, high understanding is difficult. And beyond that, the kinds of questions that we focus on in research and innovation are insufficiently anchored in the kinds of things that our society really care about. It's not, I mean, that obviously we focus on big questions and we want to improve things and make things better, but To the extent to which the activity is not properly embedded or integrated across society, the feedback between what we do and what needs to be done is not strong enough, in my view. So all of this then builds exclusivity into the knowledge economy, it undermines trust in the system, and it takes away from most people the crucial sense of agency that an understanding of how you do research and innovation gives to every single person. And I think this lone genius model has an awful lot to answer for. It's a key component of what we need to do is to move away from it, break it down, and build a much more robust and accurate idea of what research and innovation is about, and that is inherently a much more inclusive idea. So that's just the barrier between research and innovation and wider society and the problems it creates. If you kind of move on up the list, I think within research and innovation we build barriers just as rapidly and as awkwardly. A really obvious one that people talk about a lot is a kind of schism almost between what people describe as discovery research and innovation or development or product development. And we think of those things as separate activities, and we quite often think of them as a linear path from discovery to product. And everybody actually knows that this is not really what goes on, but nonetheless it's another one of those concepts that's quite deeply embedded in the way we think about these things, partly because people just like linear narratives. It's helpful in organizing your thoughts. But we have to be really careful not to be sucked into that narrative to the point that it actually reinforces itself and builds that barrier. And at the moment, I think that there's too much in our current reward structures and incentives that does that. So the way we think about investment, the way we think about measuring research and innovation tend to anchor in one or other of those places. You know, how many papers have you published? How many jobs have you created? Those are considered to be kind of separate and different things that are nothing to do with one another. And they are not necessarily, either of them, the adequate measures of a holistic understanding of what's going on. And again, they anchor you in individual people or individual activities at either end of this pathway. This gap between research and innovation in the UK is quite often characterised, because there are real issues, as a gap in investment. The so-called valley of death between the two is considered to be primarily about finding people to invest in the middle stages of a development project. And those are real issues that need to be addressed, but I actually think they are at least as much about the barriers between the people who work in those two parts of the system that inhibit the free flow of information and know-how and ideas, and as a result make joining these things up, both in the context of discoveries into products, but also in the context of people developing products, reaching back into the discovery base to solve the problems they have and influence what research gets done, because there are really exciting problems out there that people in the discovery end quite often simply don't encounter, and when they do, it's a really exciting light bulb moment. I've seen it happen. It's great. So we ought to stop thinking about it like that, start thinking about it like this, because again, all of the people around all of this activity is absolutely critical for making it work. Really understanding this network of people and ideas and getting more dynamism into the system so that people and ideas flow through it, I think are crucial to breaking down those barriers between research and innovation. And through that, I think we can solve that investment problem, because part of the problem in investment in the UK is the investor community is separate from the research and innovation community. And so we don't have the expertise in the investor community to make those high-risk investments in innovative companies. If we had that greater churn, we would have that expertise. It would be much easier to navigate. So all of these barriers, mapping right up to the disciplines, which I'll touch on a bit later, have been identified in a whole variety of reports, and they were identified in the Nurse Review that led to the establishment of UKRI. This is my favourite quote from the Nurse Review. We need a compact that bonds science and society, which will deliver both excellent science and ensure that it's used for the public good. And that, I think, encapsulates what UKRI is for. The Nurse Review was written in 2015, Act of Parliament, as Carol mentioned, through in 2016. The UKRI didn't actually start till 2018 because you can't, unfortunately, move as quickly as that, particularly in the big, complex system that is research and innovation. But it creates an extraordinary opportunity to do things differently. So we are the largest public sector funder of research and innovation in the UK. We're about half of public sector investment, direct investment in research and innovation. We are 9 councils covering all sectors, so the disciplinary-based research councils, 7 of those, but also Innovate UK, the UK's innovation agency, and Research England, that in close collaboration with the equivalent bodies in the devolved nations, invest block grants into universities. So all sectors, all disciplines, across the 9 councils in a way that then brings all of this expertise and experience together and allows us, by working together, to add an awful lot more value than any one of those individual 9 organisations could achieve alone. And of course, we are just part of the system. We work with academia, with business, with public sector, with third sector, with institutes, with international partners. But because we reach right across it, I think we can act as that smart connector, particularly since we have a lot of levers to influence how the system works and how the system connects up to deliver for people in the UK and globally. So we have a great opportunity to do research and innovation better, creating a system that critically for me gives everyone the opportunity to contribute and everyone from which everyone can benefit. So that opportunity comes from the fact that we have this amazing track record as the UK in research and innovation, and we can use that impressive national strength to deliver this sustainable, inclusive knowledge economy, and also really high quality public services. That innovation, that ingenuity is what fuels both of those things. We are a small country. We will never be China. We will never be the US. We shouldn't pretend we are. Instead, we should use the fact that we are small but strong right across all disciplines and sectors, and we can work as a result in an agile and connected way if we get that right. It's another reason why that connectivity is so critical for our success. If we can work in that collaborative, joined up way, taking down those barriers, we'll be able to use that agility to capture advantage for the UK and advantage, therefore, for the world through the creative discoveries that emerge. And I view UKRI, because it connects things up, as a really crucial national asset in achieving this goal. So as I said, our vision is for this outstanding research and innovation system that gives everyone the opportunity to contribute and to benefit, and that enriches lives in all ways, locally, nationally, and of course internationally, and we have multiple tools to deliver that. We can convene, we can catalyse, we can invest with incentives that build the collaborative, thriving and inclusive research and innovation system that connects things up. It connects discovery to prosperity and to public good. We've just earlier this year published our first 5-year strategy that sets out our key objectives in building that system across 6 key objectives. People, always people first and their careers, places and infrastructures that people need to work in to do the extraordinary work that they do, and we need to invest in ideas, in their creative ideas, and how those creative ideas drive forward new knowledge and new products and services, and therefore fuel innovation. So people with the right kit and the opportunity to pursue their ideas supports and drives innovation, which of course needs further consideration as a system, and all of those things deliver impacts, real world impacts, tackling the big challenges that we face in the world, like climate change and health, really getting the most out of the transformative technologies that are so rapidly changing the way we live and the way we work, AI, quantum, all of these extraordinary opportunities, and of course thinking about this creative, productive economy and what the high growth sectors are of the future that will provide high quality jobs for people and fund then our ability as a nation to support the kinds of public services that we want, that themselves need to be innovative, building on and using the extraordinary creativity of our research and innovation system. And to deliver all of that, we as UKRI need to be a really effective and efficient organisation. We are still very definitely on a journey from that point of view, and that's a key goal of our strategy, is to make sure that we really make the most of the fact that we are 9 councils working together and we can do way more collectively than we could individually. We need to set ourselves up from a systems point of view. We still have a lot of work on our data systems, trivial stuff like that. But more interestingly and importantly, we need to understand there's a culture change in the organisation that is really exciting to see as people start to realise the extraordinary opportunities that we have. I would say that for me is interesting thing working through the pandemic, where you suddenly have that screaming priority. It brings people together in ways that they were not brought together before to deliver rapidly in a research and innovation context, and that just takes people out of their little local area, and that's been really helpful in joining the organisation up and allowing us to build that kind of connectivity that can fuel creative research ideas and innovation in peacetime, so to speak, as well as in those kinds of emergencies. So obviously we want to do all of this in deep engagement with all of you and our wider research and innovation community, and our tagline for all of this is transforming tomorrow together. So just to give a flavour, because I think people quite often focus on the bit of our portfolio that they know, and whatever bit that is, it will be a small bit. We have £8 billion. I also have been kind of amused by the way people quite often, I think, imagine me sitting in my office with kind of stacks of banknotes or something. That people come in and say, "Can I have some of your £8 billion, please?" And I say, it doesn't, surprisingly, doesn't work that way. It's a big portfolio that is invested primarily in quite long-term projects. So every year, only a small part of that kind of turns over, so to speak, is freed up to do new things. And it's that constant churn of renewal which is the opportunity to steer the research and innovation system in new and different directions in the context of the stability of that longer-term funding. So it's about 20% of our budget that goes on the research grants that people in universities really care about. So those fully open response mode research grants, but also the targeted grants to take advantage of particular areas. About 10% goes on PhD studentships and fellowships, so investments that are very specifically in people. In the context of places, about 900 million, 10% again in infrastructure. That's big infrastructures, the square kilometre array, big things like that, but also the world-class labs programs that kits out the laboratories in research institutes and universities. 24% of our budget, again, not really clear on people's radar, goes straight into universities in England in block grants. There's equivalent funding in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland from their bodies. That's a lot of money. That's the dual support system. That provides that stability in universities that can be aligned with their strategies. And that's how that money works. It's allocated in formulas according to the Research Excellence Framework, which happens every 7 years. How that works, I think, is a critical part of our system. And using that money, giving universities the freedom to build their strategies and follow their strategies is critical. So the incentives that underpin the REF are, I think, going to be a key tool in creating that much more joined-up collaborative system than we currently have. So a really specific example is quite difficult in the REF to navigate how you deal with collaborations between universities It's fundamentally a competitive process between universities, and that's not a good thing. We need to promote university collaboration because we need also to promote the diversity in the university system. There are many universities, they have different strengths. We need to support and build those different strengths to build a complementary set of strengths across the UK to deliver the research and innovation that we need. The REF system currently is mostly about competing on a narrow set of criteria which tend to homogenise rather than diversify the very system that needs that kind of diversity. 15% of our funding on a whole range of institutes, very important again in the concept of institutional diversity, to make sure we have the right kinds of institutions across the UK with the right kind of focus to do all the different things we need to do. And then innovation-specific funding, either responsive mode innovation, smart grants through Innovate UK, or challenge-led funding to address these grand challenges like the hydrogen economy, bringing together very diverse range of people and disciplines to push forward those kinds of agendas. And then there's our international partnerships. So a big portfolio of investments that allow us to operate, and I view us very much as a portfolio management organisation. How we balance that portfolio is critical to that high-quality functioning and building the system that I talked about. So how do we need to do that differently? What needs to change? I think I've emphasised all these points as I go through. Our system is too competitive and disproportionately focused on narrow criteria for excellence. Even when we map those onto organisations, because of our lone genius model, they wound up being focused down onto individuals. And that is not healthy. And this was locked in silos. That's partly what segregates the disciplines. It segregates research from innovation, and it segregates research and innovation from wider society. So we need to think very hard about those systems, and we need to build in capability across the system to withstand shocks and to be able to capture the new opportunities that arise. And all of this, as I say, requires a portfolio-based approach to investment and to risk. Everybody, I mean, this is an argument that works with Treasury. If you're a portfolio investor, you know that across your portfolio investments, you need your high-risk, high-gain possibilities, but you also need your slow and steady things, and your risk-based investments, you need a portfolio of those that are orthogonal, so you've essentially spread your bets. So that kind of thinking is critical and is important for how we view the whole research and innovation system and how we invest to join it up properly, bridging those barriers. And so underpinning our strategy are these 4 principles for change: diversity, connectivity, resilience, and engagement. Diversity in the broadest possible sense, the right sort of funding instruments, the right sort of institutions, the right sort of people, all of them across a diverse range. Really thinking about how we join all this stuff up, investing in connectivity, incentivizing collaboration. Both of those things together build resilience. We need to think about that separately as well. And then really weaving and embedding all of this across wider society to ensure that what we do, how we work, is part of our society. Research and innovation is not something that's done to people, it's done with them and for them. And we need to shift how we view research and innovation in that way. Too much, don't worry, science will save you. That's an incredibly disempowering message, and it's very unhelpful also when then science doesn't save you. We need collectively, if we work together, we have tools to address the problems that we face. That's a very empowering message that we need to project. All of this, in the middle, at the heart of it, people. We need to develop, attract, and retain the full range of skilled people with those really empowering messages. That contributes to making the UK a really attractive destination for talented people if we demonstrate that we value teams, that we value those different kind of skills that people bring in, that we're working in a different way that supports outcomes and supports individuals as part of a collective endeavour. And shift research culture then to support people to pursue the ideas which really motivate people, and then shift the way we think about the relationship between research and innovation from a high-quality engagement or dialogue, but into a proper full partnership. specific things that we can do. All of this is a big culture change and will require a lot of different things. We have a huge portfolio of interventions in UKRI that we're interested in. Some of them we're trialling, some of them we have trialled and are pushing through. Critical to that, to me, is really diversifying career paths, dynamic, flexible careers that span disciplines and sectors, and support the full breadth and diversity of people, skills and ideas necessary for R&I to thrive. And that's something I know is very close to the heart of the Science Council. And we need to signpost opportunities to everybody in the UK and internationally. All kinds of people have something fantastic that they can contribute to research and innovation. And of course, we need to deliver a really high quality EDI strategy that underpins all of this. So back to the lone genius. This person has got to go. At least they haven't got to go. They've got to see where they sit in a much wider community of people working with them, right out across the research and innovation system. And this collective group of people is much stronger than a bunch of individual people worrying about whether their experiment will work. If you're doing it together, it's much more likely to work, and you feel much more supported and empowered as you do it. Those are critical changes that we need in our system. And so there's a few things we're doing. You might have seen the 101 Jobs campaign. It's a very simple thing, but it's been quite effective. Little videos of all kinds of people working in research and innovation who don't think of themselves as research and innovators, but are nonetheless doing fantastic roles contributing to the system. One of my favourites is the chef on the British Antarctic Survey research base in Rotherham. Those people couldn't work if they couldn't eat, and believe me, being a chef in the Antarctic is not straightforward. So really a fun resource which I hope will help everybody to raise the profile of this full range of jobs we need out into the wider education system, building that connectivity between schools, further education, higher education, and the movement of ideas and people between all of those things is critical. And as I've emphasized before, across the whole research and innovation system, different kinds of place where research and innovation happen, but all of the adjunct activities in policy and so on and so forth. So if you go back to just the academic model, what this comes down to is that the way researchers think about themselves in academia and thought about themselves for years, I've given many talks that look like this. Here's the progress along the career path, undergrad, PhD, postdoc, lecturer, professor, and we know that this is a very competitive career path with lots of competition at every step. It's quite challenging and demoralizing for people, and yet it's the path that is projected. I've seen lots of anxiety on diversity data, for example, which start with numbers at one end and they show them dropping off at the other end, and people talk about attrition. It's very, very myopic, the view of what a research career looks like. Perhaps in a really advanced state, you might think you might go into industry at some point. This is just not how we're going to transform this system. We need to think about the full range of things that anybody could do, and we need to think about the huge diversity of paths you can take through that system. So maybe you're working in the care system, you think you need a bit more theoretical underpinning for what you do, so you do an undergraduate degree, you go back into the care system, you think you see a real opportunity to make a difference in your practice through a research project, so you do a PhD, that allows you to spin out a small company, which is then bought out by a big company, and you think, oh, maybe I need to develop this a bit further, so you go back into the university research base, and then you realise that actually, to get the levers on the area that you're particularly interested in, you need to go into policy. This sort of thing is a science career. Where can people see that at the moment? They can't. How do we reward and incentivize people to take these much more dynamic careers? Because they're there for the taking, and there are plenty of people doing this. They're just not the people you see or talk to. So one of the things we've done is rolled out a new type of CV that was developed originally at the Royal Society. that allows you to compare people who've had very different backgrounds, because it asks, instead of what are your publications and how many lectures do you give, it says what are your contributions to developing knowledge or to innovation, how do you support people around you, what are your wider contributions to the research and innovation system, and how are you engaging with a wider range of stakeholders. 4 chunks to the CV, everybody can fill that out, whatever their career path, and you can compare people who've had very different career paths fairly and assess them for whatever it is you're assessing them for. We're adopting it for all UKRI funding opportunities that require a track record, in the hope that we will shift the dial on what good looks like, and therefore we can diversify critically the range of people working in research and innovation who we fund, and capture that much wider range of ideas and experiences that we really need in the research base. So we hope that will help join things up, join up the education system, join up the research and innovation system much better by moving people through it, and build that kind of connected system that I said we needed at the beginning. And we're going to all need to work together to do that, to drive through these principles for change. Everything that we do, we need to think, have I thought about diversity? Have I thought about connectivity? Is this supporting resilience? And how can I engage the widest range of people needed to make this a success? That's how all of the decisions we're making through our strategic plans are being filtered to try to build that system, so that 20 years on, we won't still be looking at this same list of things, and we will be working in that environment that we know everybody wants to see, that we know fires up a full range of people and empowers them to make things better. So I'm really delighted to have been able to share this with you, with this group of people whom I know is working really hard to deliver on the same kind of agenda, and I'm very much looking forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you for an incredibly thought-provoking lecture, and as you say, very close to the hearts of everybody here and watching online. We have 10-15 minutes for questions. Thank you, please go.
Hi, thanks very much. Ian Young, Chief Scientific Advisor Health, Northern Ireland. You talked about the barrier between science innovators and society, and the perception that science and innovators are somehow other. And that's something that is very deeply embedded in culture and popular entertainment and more widely. And I'm sure underpins public reluctance, for example, to share health data and allow access to scientists and innovators. You've touched a little bit on this, but how do you think that can be effectively combated and that particular barrier most effectively removed? Because it's so deeply embedded, I think.
It's a very interesting question, and as I say, it is a profound culture change that will need multiple interventions. And I think Northern Ireland's doing a particularly good job on a lot of this, joining up the different actors in the system and making more visible the opportunities there are for people. I think part of it comes from the idea that the only people working in research and innovation are these peculiar genius people, and you don't quite trust them because they're sort of superhumanly intelligent, but there also is this myth that they're kind of subhumanly robotic, who they're working by pure logic, and it doesn't seem very human. Whereas research and innovation is an extraordinarily basic human instinct. How does this work? How can I make it better? That you can watch your 2-year-old do this, or playing. I mean, what's this? How does it work? What would happen if I did this to it? That stuff, bringing people in with that kind of stuff, and humanizing it, I think, is critical. And a key part of that is to highlight the many roles of people working in research and innovation who definitely aren't that genius type person, which is why 101 jobs and things is important. And that needs to map right down into schools, where also I think we could do with connecting up the curriculum better. So again, there's this science that's hard. Are you sure you really want to do that because it's really difficult? That's not a good way to think about it. I have a lot of hope from some of the kind of much more disruptive things coming in. So, for example, coding, key skill in the economy. Everybody's going to need to do that. I think it's got to be the fourth R. It's even less believably an R than arithmetic, but nonetheless, we're going to have to teach coding in primary schools, and that blurring between the notion of what's sciencey and what isn't sciencey is another part of this whole process, to make the entire concept of research, of discovery, much more accessible and available to everybody. So it's a whole range of things. The way science is portrayed on TV, very important. I've been trying to think about how you could have the Great British Science Off, get people, doing science in that kind of environment. A whole range of things. So, a great question, no easy answer, but the plus about the difficulty of culture change is that you do wind up having to do a lot of small things, and everybody can get involved in those small things, and that is itself a culture-changing activity.
And thank you, Andrew Mackenzie from the Physiological Society. Thank you for the very interesting lecture. In terms of UKRI acting as a broader steward of the sector, how do you access, I guess, similar conversations and discussions going on in industry, going on in a clinical setting? I guess, what are the levers that UKRI have to affect the bits of the sector where there's not direct funding and direct control and relationships? Are they on board? Are they willing to get involved? Are they further ahead maybe on some of these challenges than the publicly funded research elements of the sector?
Absolutely. So, 2/3 of the research and innovation that happens in this country happens in the private sector. We have Innovate UK, who are deeply engaged and embedded in that sector, but also actually every single one of the disciplinary research councils have quite deep connections with their relevant industrial partners. So lots of community building there. And Research England has explicitly a knowledge exchange activity in supporting universities to build local communities of partnership between the university sector and the local industrial landscape. So I think all of this is not about control. That's kind of part of the point, really. It's all about relationship building and understanding and collaboration, and knowing that really good ideas are out there and we need to find them and share them and work together to drive forward these agendas. I somewhere in the audience is Ginny, because whom I used to work with a lot on plant biology issues, which is another great interest of the Gatsby Foundation. And my background is, as Carol said, plant developmental biology. The brilliant thing about plants is they make decisions all the time on, where to invest their growth. Should I make more roots? Should I make more shoots? All of those kinds of things. They do that decision making through massive information flow around the plant that links everything together. No central processing. So it's essentially a self-organizing, distributed decision-making system that makes very sensible investment decisions without a brain. And that's the kind of thing that actually already and automatically happens in our system. If we can understand that and therefore tune how the information flows and make sure that the information is flowing effectively and efficiently, that's how we get to deliver the kind of transformative change that we want. So we have to invest time in talking to all of those people, which is a lot of time and it's difficult, but it's why organizations like the Science Council, for example, are so helpful, because you can talk to a small number of people who reach a much larger number of people. So it's continuous work to join things up.
Thank you. Tim McLaughlin from the Institute of Food Science and Technology. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thinking about being disruptive, what role, if any, can you see for apprenticeships to inspire young people into research?
Absolutely. I think apprenticeships are very critical in this whole landscape. And they also are much more widely deployable, I think, than the current traditional idea of apprenticeship. So they can be used in a much wider range of contexts, a much wider range of sectors. Again, clearly the major players there are going to be industry, but I know an increasing number of universities run apprenticeship schemes, which are powerful and helpful. And of course, UKRI also runs a number of major national laboratories, and they run a significant number of apprenticeship schemes, which are also very valuable. So very interested in the full range of opportunities to bring people in through different routes, because different people will feel more comfortable, and it will better match their aspirations than the traditional, that straight line route, which I think is very unhelpful. And one of the things I think is particularly important from that point of view is that a lot of people from non-traditional backgrounds are particularly put off by the idea of those very long training periods in university and PhD and all the rest of it. They want to get in there now, be economically making a difference. And that's absolutely something we should support through apprenticeship routes. Through one of the most inspiring things I visited is a fantastic project in Birmingham City University that supports undergraduates to start companies. All of those kinds of things we need to try to ensure that we are valuing, that we are capturing people's creativity wherever they are and whoever they are, and allowing them to express it through a sufficiently wide range of routes that it really interfaces and captures the full range of activity. And we've narrowed far too far, and that's a real problem.
Thanks. Karen Strubans from Royal Society of Chemistry. Really inspiring talk, Ottoline, and I think I'm very much convinced as you are about the key role of assessment in addressing some of these issues. One, I think, very challenging area in that respect is the mobility between sectors, and especially from outside academia back into academia. I think that's an extremely challenging area where I think there's opportunities in using the narrative CV that you've mentioned, but I'm struggling a bit with seeing how that will work in the context of the research excellence framework, and also the weight between research excellence and knowledge exchange in terms of the focus on those. Is that something that is playing into the current future research assessment framework, how that intersectoral mobility specifically can be improved?
Absolutely, and I think the evolution of the research excellence framework in any case has each time reduced the focus on individual people with a set of particular sorts of research output. And to me, the critical missing step, which we never quite got round to the last time because it turned out to be actually quite difficult, is to break completely that link to the individual. The idea is you're assessing the activity of the university. Many individuals are contributing to that activity, and some papers will arise, patents, spin-out companies, whatever. And indeed, the impact assessment is a critical part of the REF that asks about those things. But nonetheless, in the end, because there's still individuals with linked research outputs, that makes it much harder to create the diverse communities that universities need, because there is an anchor back to individuals who have produced papers. And I think that's something we need to break. The other reason we need to break that is because currently the money that comes into universities comes in counting the number of people in that category. And that means that's the type of person that the incentive is to hire more of. So then you get rid of all the staff that go around those lone genius types, and you'll hire more and more people who are trying to fit that model. And it creates all kinds of sustainability issues for the financial robustness of universities, all kinds of problems for my organisation where you now have a very large number of people competing to win funding, and where their kind of life depends on it. It's not a sustainable situation. So really thinking hard about how the REF works and how it can incentivise the right things in the context of a sector that is actually quite conservative in its ability to respond. So if you look at the rules of the REF, it ought to be just fine, but the way that the thing's built up over the years and the way that it's interpreted and the level of conservatism in how institutions interact with it mean that it is not just fine, and we definitely need to think about that in the context of the next iteration.
Ottoline, thank you for the talk, which is really interesting and thought-provoking. There's one area you didn't cover, and that is having worked in a research environment and then also worked in the private sector and public sector. It is peculiar that in the research environment, as you ascend, you are not taught leadership and management. And when you are taught those things, the first thing you learn is the value of teams and diversity of teams, and that your job as a leader is to empower your team and to nurture them and to train them and give them. And the most senior person in any organization also has their own learning and development needs. So where do you think the academic sector is on recognizing that deficit, and where is UKRI on as a sort of major, well, the major center and instrument of change in that regard?
Yes. So this is a really important point. I think leadership is absolutely critical in all of this. Leadership in a number of universities is an interesting concept, partly because, again, we're back to lone genius, because there's a deep kind of belief in the kind of the need for independence of all of those lone geniuses to do what they do. And the real confusion between leadership and management, and a quite deeply embedded notion of that top-down kind of heroic leadership model, which equates leadership with direction and control, as we've talked about a bit before. Whereas actually I think high-quality leadership in research and innovation altogether is fundamentally about how you marry that kind of bottom-up creativity with enough top-down structure to allow it to operate in the first place and to thrive and capture the outputs and more than the sum of the parts as you go along. It's quite a difficult job, and it is about that kind of, it's about systems. It's always about systems. And so what we need to do, and it's happened a bit, I mean, when I started, there was no leadership training, and now there is quite a lot of leadership training available in universities. It's a little bit, there aren't enough people engaging with it deeply enough to drive the culture change that we need, but it's there, which is very positive. And from a what UKRI can do point of view, incentivising that is critical. And to me, it would be one of the things I would expect to see in the How Are You Supporting People box. That should include how are you developing your skills to manage and lead teams, and in your how am I contributing to the wider system box, how am I stepping up to leadership roles across the system to make the whole thing work better. Because absolutely a key problem is the undervaluing of leadership as a concept. It's viewed as a kind of annoying administrative responsibility that you try to give to somebody else if you possibly can. and that's not helpful.
So, Ottoline, on that incredible note, I would like to offer you our great thanks from the Science Council, a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much.
And please join me in thanking Professor Dame Ottoline Leyser. That final question and answer was not a plant. I don't believe we spoke to you beforehand, Rupert, to ask you about that. But it leads perfectly onto the next part of the evening. And it's my pleasure to invite my dear friend and colleague, James Banks, who is our External Relationships Manager, to join me on the stage to introduce our Continuous Professional Development Awards presentation. Jane, please.
Thank you, Carol. It's a pleasure to add my welcome to you all today on behalf of my dear colleague Helen, our Science Council CEO, who sadly has a tickly throat that if she was to elevate the volume of her voice gets worse and she can't do anything but cough. So I'm delighted and thank you for coming here today to collectively come together to celebrate science through this lens of committing to professional development. The Science Council is delighted through its members and through the professional registers to be playing our part as a connector of people across discipline in supporting growth in professionalism in science for the greater good of society. As Carol mentioned earlier, sadly we were unable to come together for 2020 and 2021, and we're super excited to be here face-to-face this evening, but we are going to celebrate those who won awards or were commended in 2020 and 2021. Continuing professional development is the bedrock of professional practice, personal growth, and professional accountability to those we ultimately serve in society. Members of the public, national bodies such as UKRI, employers, and more will be reassured in the knowledge that the science workforce is at the forefront of their practice in whatever setting this is. The Science Council stands for excellence in science, and working in partnership with our professional body members, we aim to uphold standards of professional practice through registration with us and through working with our members on offering support and development. Increasingly, we seek to work together as a network to advocate for you as scientists and the broader profession of science at a time of both great challenge, but also immense possibility and opportunity. Showing that you have developed yourselves, are up to date, and excelling in your roles is not only professionally important, but also helpful in developing your career in a very practical sense. Everyone is a winner today. Congratulations to you all. These awards allow us to showcase the importance and benefit of professional development, and the experiences and stories of those who are here today will be used as examples to inspire and encourage others. You are valued role models. And with that in mind, it is my pleasure to announce the winners of not only this year's 2022 CPD Award winners, but also those of 2020 and 21. I'm not sure that I'm aware of all of those who were awarded in 2020, but if you are in the room and you were a winner or commended in 2020, would you like to make your way to the stage to receive a certificate? I'm just going to take the opportunity of a photo. So if you would just like to stand. And for 2021, would those of you who are in the room like to come forward and receive your certificate, and may we show our delight. The CPD Awards for 2020 and 2021 took place virtually. A number of videos were created, and they are available on the Science Council website, and I'd really encourage you to visit our website and have a look at those videos. They can also be found on our YouTube channel. Moving on to 2022, first up we have the winner of the Chartered Scientist Award, and the winner is Kelly Bill. Kelly. Kelly and Carol to step across for a photo. That would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you. And moving on to the Registered Scientist Award, the winner this year is Ray Freestone. Ray. Thank you, Ray. And if we could have a round of applause for Laura Smith, who is the winner of the Registered Science Technician Award, sadly not able to be with us today. And the winner of the Chartered Science Teach Award goes to John Hale. Also a round of applause, please. John is not able to be with us today. So the commendations for 2022 you see before you. I think everybody but Andrea is not able to be with us. So could we have everyone else to the front of the room, please?
I don't mind.
Thank you.
Do you want a collective or an individual? Collective photo? Okay, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another round of applause.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to all of you who came to accept your awards or celebrate previous years. And I'm always incredibly humbled when I see the work that our registrants do. I'm currently going through my CSI, and so you are incredible role models for me. Jane is a great supporter and is giving me support, and I'm doing it through the Institute of Physics, and I have to say it's immensely difficult. And it really talks to some of the points that Ottoline raised about the community, about the recognition in yourself of the work that you've done, but the contributions that you've made and how you've worked in the wider teams. And so I take my hats off to all of you. Incredible piece of work, and also real recognition of the continuous professional development, your own motivation to continually improve yourself, the support you have from your employers. And again, I think that really goes to the fundamental trust in science and the trustworthiness of science and our science systems. So congratulations to you all. Thank you all for coming tonight. We finished the formal parts of the proceedings. I hope you will join us for networking, and after the networking I hope you have a safe journey home and stay in touch with the Science Council. Thank you again for this evening.